Kundalini with higher vibration, and I am talking to you now with Sukmandir Singh Khalsa. Sukmandir, Sukmandir um, is a teacher of Kundalini Yoga for, gosh, well, he'll tell you how many years. I think probably, what, 40 years? But
Oh,
he'll give
50, it must be 50 years now. Let's
50
see,
years
50,
now.
probably
50
54,
years.
54 years now.
54 years now. Okay, so here we have like a leading expert in Kundalini Yoga, one of the first people to work with Yogi Bhajan back in the day when Yogi came to the United States to begin Kundalini Yoga here. So he started teaching it, and Sukmandir worked alongside him, testing out postures, creating kriyas, and we're going to talk to him about that. And I came to understand about Kundalini Yoga, a little bit about Kundalini Yoga, when I became ill years ago with a thyroid disease that left my nervous system really taxed. And so I went online to Google what could potentially help my nervous system. Found out, oh, there's Kundalini Yoga. Went online, started to try some of the Kundalini Yoga that was out there. Landed onto Kundalini Live, where I found Sukmandir, and then began doing Kundalini yoga every single day, became addicted to it. And years later, after being an online student for about 6 years, started talking to Sukmandir, and we, had conversations, and I found out fascinating things about him and really wanted to share those things with everyone else. So that's why we're here. Okay. And so, Sukmandir, I'm so, so, so happy to have you here, and I'm so indebted to you for everything that you've done, your teachings. The reason why I love Sukmandir's teachings, by the way, everyone, is that anyone can teach Kundalini postures and and all of the kriyas, but the spiritual teachings that he drops into that hour that you're doing yoga with him really helps guide you on your path, brings everything together spiritually, and I feel really helped guide me over the last 6 years. And that you can't get from everyone. And that just comes from being on this planet a long time, doing this a long time, and having the wisdom. And so that's why when I'm so stressed out, I can turn on a video where Sukmandir is teaching and just feel, bam, I'm okay again, everything is in balance, and it's all good. So with that, I want to introduce you to Sukmandir Singh Khalsa. Sukmandir, I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you, Marianne, and couldn't imagine a more gracious introduction.
I tried, just spur the
This is
moment.
beautiful. Well, the only thing that at this point in my life, and at any point in my life, was to be in the now and to be authentic, like I am right now, in the now, with a greater reality of possibility. And as you get my age, what's really fun too is that you start to realize, well, that now is getting you understand the limitations of that now. So it gives a more compressed feeling here. But that's all that matters. So for me, this is the only thing that matters. This experience of the Kundalini as I'm talking to you and imagining it in my body and letting it flow through it. And that has to be, if you're going to teach as close to the experience as you can. Try to teach from as it moves through your own body. Try to teach us that you start to embody that as close as you can. I mean, there's different levels of immersion here. But that would be any advice I'd give aspiring teachers, is to embody what you're trying to teach. Don't let it just become this, throw out type of programming we put ourselves in. There's to do this postures, do this, but to embody the idea of it, to embody the philosophy of it, the vision of it. as close as you can. And
Hmm.
that'll become part of your sadhana, of course, embodying that. When you get really good at it, you become an archetypical. And the archetypical spreads across time and space and becomes in a sense, a focal point, or at least a way of moderating the group consensus reality here.
Yeah.
So that happens.
And what could be better
Anyway,
than being your
that's it.
authentic self, right?
I'm sorry.
What could be better than being your authentic self, right?
What else could
Feel
it be?
good.
What
Right,
what
exactly.
else? There's nothing else
Right.
going.
Right, but the world is telling young people they should be so many different things, other
Well,
than themselves.
well, that's it. Well, there's no. I didn't get my. I always laugh. I didn't ever get my training manual when I got this body. So where do you get the programming to get to the point of to actually to look at yourself? To actually say, "Wow, how deep can I go into this image of what I think the self is?" And you pull back these layers of consciousness, and what is left? Well, formlessness is there, but if you're going to bring it into this form, this human consciousness, then you've got to embody it. You literally have to let that formlessness, the infinite possibilities, become somehow at least interfaced with this physical form.
Hmm.
And that's an ongoing process. And in the now, so I'm saying I'm doing it as I'm talking to you, trying to imagine, like, okay, can this really, are you just, am I just talking about it, or can I experience this? So I try to talk from that level too, as my speech, as I'm going, maybe I can actually listen to myself and figure this out, that
Yeah,
kind of thing.
right. Let's take everyone into understanding what Kundalini Yoga is if they don't, right?
Ah,
So take us back to, well, first of all, give us your definition for anyone out there who doesn't know what it is, who's hearing this for the very first time. Coming from you, how would you define Kundalini Yoga and Kundalini, the energy?
well, again, all yoga, all manifestation of consciousness is the dance between form and formless, and it's just a creative process, Shiva Shakti. So in this sense, it's pretty all inclusive, I know, and I'll get back to some specifics here, but it's everything. Everything is Kundalini yoga. And paying attention to it is the actual yoga part of it. Creating a form of consciousness that can actually sit back and see the grand, or at least a glimpse of the grand play of all the forces involved here, and have a conscious, coherent discourse with itself to interpret it. That seems to be what's going on here, creating this personality construct that's somewhat multidimensional, and not becoming schizophrenic in that form. What's stable? Well, Kundalini Yoga has to create a stable form of consciousness that can allow that vision to become implanted in the physical form. Kundalini Yoga is that, a way of doing that, a schematic, a diagram, and if you follow that visionary diagram, of this chakra system, of the Muladhara, the base, moving up through all the different planes of consciousness, all the way to the top of the head, the 10th gate, Sahasrara, thousand petal lotus. If you can envision an energetic field that looks like that, or might even think, fantasy, Disney it if you want. But if you can start to embody that vision all the way down from the center of the earth, all the way to the top of your head, and in between, that's what it comes down to. It's the heart, right in the middle. So
Mhm.
that's where we speak from. It has to be. And it's for my case, just because I'm so silly sometimes, I really have to eliminate all the other stuff before I even get to the heart. Oh yeah, it is the heart, of course. Anyway,
So,
Kundalini Yoga is that relationship between Shiva and Shakti, the the form and the formless, or the form, or looking at itself. What is the reality? And what is the illusion? In other words, what is creating who here? Who's creating what? It's that relationship on an energetic level, moving through the chakras up and down, giving full access from a conscious, stable point, a hopefully compassionate, heart-centered consciousness.
right.
Okay, that's it.
And for those people who don't know what the chakra system is out there, you've probably seen images of it, where you have the base chakra in the human body as red going all the way up to the top, which is kind of a purplish whitish up at the top. And we're essentially moving energy through a series of postures up through the body, up essentially through the spine to up into the third eye. And the purpose really we feel is to connect to our higher selves, which then in my particular case, I feel guides me in my life. So, and Sukmandir, he has spent the last 54 years doing yoga. And so he's at a level that, he can live it on day to day, day to day, become that and really understand it in a way that, takes that long to understand. So Sukmandir, why don't you tell us how old you were when you stumbled onto Kundalini Yoga, the story about that you told me, which was really cool, and then how you then went from finding out about these postures to meeting Yogi Bhajan and how that transpired.
Wow, you want to go through that whole story, huh?
Well, you can make it as brief as, as you want. I know it's a long one, but it's interesting though.
Well, it was interesting to live, actually. It was fascinating, actually. But it would have to start out with, the psychedelic revolution,
Yeah, tell us.
And one of the is being part of the of interface here, let's say, coupled with me being in really good shape, coupled with being able to sit with a straight spine, by great good fortune, and being able to just do this for like an hour straight, totally absorbed in it. Perfect. Care in the world. Most peaceful, graceful state of mind I've ever been in.
You really did it for a whole hour?
Whole hour. So,
Wow.
so I was told. I had no idea. I
Okay.
didn't come out of this whole thing for hours and hours and hours before we could even communicate. But that's the time frame I was told.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Reliable witnesses too. So
What was that experience like when you were doing it for a whole hour on LSD, doing breath of fire with your arms
I
out?
can
What
say
happened?
it really works. But if I hadn't had the good fortune to have extremely healthy body at the time, extremely expanded lung system and nervous system to deal with this,
Mm-hmm.
that's why I would, that's why I say, don't try this at home, kids. No one's going to recommend this particular path to you. But I'm here to say that it did work. So,
Mm-hmm.
but you've got to really set the form if you're going to play this game. You've got to take the time to acclimatize your body and mind to the state of consciousness. And then what it feels like, what it apparently was, is the crown center opens, thousand petal lotus opens. And
And
you're
what does
sitting,
that feel like
it's
when the
just you're
crown
sitting,
center opens?
just sitting in this dome. It's like sitting in a cathedral, lit up, iridescent on all sides. That's the dome. It's created by the energetic field of the mind itself. On the top of this dome, there's brilliant light coming down. In fact, that light is creating that whole dome. You're sitting in total peace. Like I was nonchalant. It's like, this is kind of cool. Literally, that much at peace,
Yeah,
in my teenage mind,
right.
It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So it was. So then I go, well, where's this light coming from? Okay, so I'm going, where is this light coming? What's causing this illumination? I'm in that state of consciousness, absorption. So I kind of pull myself up and out of the top of my head, literally. I'm like, it felt like I was. And then just pure lights comes, lights it's out of there it is.
Mm-hmm. And then in comparison, like years later, when you did Kundalini yoga again without the LSD, what did you experience?
It was a gradual, how do you say, a gradual movement into more practical reality. There had to be a way of doing this that was practical to insert in the default reality. In other words, there has to be a way to do this. It wasn't sustainable to just do it with LSD. It had to be integrated into the entire biological, neurological network. And
Hmm.
it just takes time. That just takes time. And you have to have the patience for it. So at first it was just, answer your question, it was difficult to get out of the highs into the mundane practice of installing it. It's like,
Hmm.
oh, I got the I got the intro program. Now I got to figure this shit out. You know? It's like, so this takes time to do that. And then, well, and time has its price, you know. You have to
Yeah.
go through the trial and error and the like, wow, did I really do that? Type stuff. Have some compassion for yourself.
Right. So then, after you did this, right, and you had this experience, you probably just knew a few of the postures. Where did you go to find out more of these postures back in the day? And how did you then stumble on Yogi Bhajan?
Well, that's the second part of the story, of course.
Okay, go
Yeah.
ahead.
So I heard that he was down in Los Angeles. So I'm up in Yosemite, and so went down there, got down to Los Angeles, and and of course, me being me, still on LSD, pretty much as that's the state of consciousness I'm living in. And Yogi Bhajan's walking down the beach, and I'm walking up the beach, and we're both looking up, and I'm in that level, and we both look, we both just start laughing. It's like,
Had you ever met him before?
no, no, this is the first time. And actually, I was there to meet him, you know. And then he went, uh-huh, just fun. So that was the first time I met him, and then I studied with him down in Los Angeles, and then I lived in a few different ashrams and migrated finally up to San Francisco area and lived in. You want to tell that story? We have time for that story.
Yeah, go ahead, tell me.
Was ultimately called Hargobind Sahib, but it was an old lumber baron's mansion in San Rafael, and everybody was there. This was the who's who of the psychedelic movement at that time and point in consciousness in San Francisco. It was that cool, right? It was that.
Yeah.
You have to understand how, no, we had the Grateful Dead come and play there at the ashram. Just that was it. They came, the Sufi dancers were there too, and we're part of our yoga. This is what we do. Cool. This is how Kundalini manifests itself. And we were just going, well, of course, why wouldn't it? That ashram.
And did you do Kundalini yoga to the Grateful Dead actually playing for you?
Oh, playing with us. Sat Santok, who just passed, by the way, a few days ago, was the one of the managers for Grateful Dead. So they were all just the whole group. In fact, the person that owned the mansion that wanted to get us to was one of the people that recorded for that whole. There's a whole, it was that consciousness at that
Right.
time.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know? So anyway, that happened. So that's where I continued my studies and practicing yoga, and that's all I did. I mean, no, well, you don't have much expense. There's ways of doing, more stories, but rather than just say I had the time was given to me by the grace of whatever to immerse myself, not do any drugs, not do anything at all in the yoga,
Hmm.
24/7. And I did
Hmm.
that for years, maybe 2 years. And because of that, and that's what I'd say to young people today, or anybody who's listening to this, find a way to immerse yourself in it. A way you can trust. I know I bought into a cult for a while. I get that. If you might pay a price, but as long as you can kind of give yourself an exit ramp if you need to, I think you're okay. Get the discipline, you know?
Right, right.
Yeah. So, well, is that far enough back into anything?
Yeah. I mean, that
Okay.
gave us a really good idea of what it was like. And so, how did you change as a result of doing that immersive experience? Like you personally, what did you see transform in yourself?
So, unlike my friend Kier, um, we have to get through A for B to C. There's a lot of ways you can see where you want to be, but you have to go through it they're called probably karmas or samskars or whatever tendencies. Where I'm going is I can see where I want to go, but I had to start. For me, because everything was so or in a sense, sexually oriented, I had to control that energy as a young male, right? And I'm
Hmm.
surrounded by, this is the 60s, or, early 60s, 70s, right?
Right.
And, you know, what are you going to do with that? It's like, okay, it's not like, so the only pathway is to become a monk or to become a householder, because you have to control it some way. You have
Hmm.
to either just shut yourself off, in my case. Maybe there's other ways of doing this, but at that time, in my case, it was two ways. And I wasn't willing to do that, shut myself off. So I became a householder, and that becomes part of then you go through that. The practical application of that is a commitment. This is part of the balancing out. You understand it's part of the balancing out of the whole psychological, biological matrix here that you understand that, but still going through the process as it's, how do you say trials?
Right.
You go through it, because
Yeah.
you focus on the destination here. So I'm getting at, sometimes the path is a little more convoluted than, because you have to fit into your own psychological, biological matrix here. You got to fit into your own hopes and dreams because it's you. So you find your way through it, but keep focused on the pathway back to, well, however you want to call it, universal light. What is this? Shiva Shakti. That brings you back to that. Back to that point, and I wanted to not forget this, because when I'm back there at the point out of the top of my head, looking at this light coming down, I'm going, okay, am I, and I'm aware of the Shiva image of that, okay? I'm aware of that light coming out and creating the whole universe. And I'm just thinking, all right, here's the reality, Sukmandir. If you're gonna really talk to yourself, you're gonna really talk to yourself in this. That light is coming out of the top of your head, and you're looking at yourself right now, looking at yourself in this multiple image of Shiva going back through time and space. So I'm confronted with that image. Then I say, okay, well, that's cool. So how does that, and then I say, okay, well, that has to become part of you. It has to become you. If you're going to really inhabit that,
Hmm.
you're going to do that. It has to permeate every cell in my body. So I
Hmm.
keep bringing it back into my body, reminding myself, okay, that's a really cool intellectual thought. That's like, yeah, okay, cool, nice vision. But until I can bring it back into my life, my body, as a holistic vision, then it's just a nice story, you know.
Right. So once you realize, that you're have this infiniteness to you, that's what it sounds like in this moment, right? Then you realize that the Kundalini energy, right, was going through you, and it's a sexual energy in nature.
Has to
So
be.
you had to contain it in some way. And you're either going to give in to the times, which was like free love and sex, right? And do all that, or you were going to become a monk and you were going to hold it in, right? Or you
Well, I
were
did some,
going,
let's put it this way. I did some of that. So but that was a
right,
choice.
of
Ultimately.
course. Well, you're a young person, right?
Yeah,
Of
for
course, you're
God's
supposed
sake, for God's
exactly.
sake.
Exactly. But then you decided you were going to become a householder and get married,
Yeah,
right? And you were
yeah,
going to probably pop out a few babies as a result,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I think
So those
there's
are some
four,
decisions. Four
four,
babies. He had four babies. Yeah.
and I have 6 grandchildren. So that's how cool. I mean, watching that whole cycle is really cool, especially with my new granddaughter. It's like,
Right.
you,
Exactly.
you trust,
Fun.
you trust her with me?
So, like that energy, right, going through you all these years is how did it change you spiritually, like as a person, like how you behave towards others? Was there anything that was adjusted? Were you just naturally a very good person? Did you evolve into a more warm-hearted, open-hearted person? Like what exactly happened?
Good. It's a really good question. Originally, from my earliest childhood memories, I've always been a really heartfelt person. Through the adolescent processing, going through that, I think that created a lot of angst, you know, and that, as everybody else, how we deal with that becomes a formative thing of our personality. So, because of that angst, and not excusing myself in any way, but in a social situation I found myself in economic situations that were possible for me, I found myself becoming kind of an asshole. which was interesting because I don't see myself as that, but I can certainly see that when I lost track of what I was looking to myself, that those primal apex predator qualities were right there,
Mhm.
you know? So that, in a sense, woke me up. I said, okay, yeah, that does not lead on a pathway any way to the formulation of what you're looking for here. So I'm aware of that, and I'm aware of that in all of us. So I think it's just part of our genetic evolutionary code.
Mhm.
Um, I guess that's the cautionary tale. Don't be an asshole.
Right. Yeah. And we all have the ability to be assholes, right?
Yeah,
Every
it's
day there's a
true.
choice.
Yes.
In every moment
Some
there's
of
a
us just
choice.
some of us just excel in that attitude, you know.
Exactly. Right. Excuse me. So let's move into another question here. Okay. From your perspective, because you were there at the time, here you are, the middle of the 60s, time of great revolution. There's all this stuff happening. I'd give anything to go back and be part of that time.
Mm.
You stumble into Yogi Bhajan. What was your opinion of this person since there was so much controversy, in the last couple of years over him? What was your personal opinion having experienced him?
Well, first of all, meeting him on acid. When you meet somebody on
Mm-hmm.
acid, you certainly get a multi-dimensional experience if you're anyway attuned to that. And in fact, if you
Mm-hmm.
can maybe be coherent when you're on acid, you get that experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I saw the level of depth of his own experience there. And I saw the knowledge that he possessed and was coming through him. So he was a force of nature for me for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I understand he's a guy, I understand he's still a human being. He even would always say that because that's part of the Sikh thing you have to say to keep reminding yourself, you're just another guy. Quit fucking around. It's the
Mm-hmm.
underlying mantra here. So, but nonetheless, he was that strong of alpha personality construct.
Mm-hmm.
And for us alpha personality constructs that are triggered by that, he was a fucking magnet.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, okay, you can be somehow coherent, compassionate, and still have those qualities. Okay, I'm listening.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of
Mm-hmm.
personality was really
Yeah,
attracted to
yeah.
him. So a lot of you know, really kind of cool people who were attracted in that sense of personality. He also attracted devotees too, and that whole thing happened. But the teachers who he was training were kind of this alpha personality style, from my experience and watching him over the years now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just part of it, though. You recognize that. But he was, yeah. And I've always respected him. His image of morality, is a little bit different than our Western thing. He came from a dynasty, a Sikh Raj mentality, where it's okay to have a harem, where it's okay to, that's just part of that's what royalty does. And he saw himself as Maharaj. And he
Mm-hmm.
sold it, for God's sake, and you have to admire that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we all played with it for a while. Where even then I was going, okay, well, it's a nice story. And Rajneesh is getting his 90 Rolls Royces. Well, what the fuck, You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So that came through and saying, okay, even though we kind of were watching this and going, well, it's getting a little out of hand, isn't it? But okay. What is out of hand these days? So, like, what's out of hand these days? What's too
Right.
much? How do you know until it's too much? No excuses, but
Yeah.
cults cults are kind of families, you know, and it's nice to be the only sane one wearing white bandages on your head.
Very funny. Well, I get the sense, a very clear sense. You paint a wonderful picture of him as a character. And it's kind of like,
Awesome,
yeah,
awesome, awesome.
He's an awesome character. And it was
Yes.
the type of play. It was like there was, there were a bunch of actors. It was a play going on. It was, a scene out of history. It's just, like you don't feel like you're very attached to the outcome of what happened and
And
that.
you were doing good too. You're still all of us ex-psychedelic warriors I feel like we're doing good. We're promoting a better way, or at least a more coherent way of doing this,
Right.
of getting high, you know? It wasn't like yeah, it was that whole thing. It was evangelical.
Absolutely. I get it. I get it, man. I get it. And
You can
I can
talk you.
understand how you would feel. Yeah.
Oh, great.
That's hilarious.
Didn't you? So that's how you can talk yourself into this stuff. So
Yeah.
beware, guys. Every little form of refuge has its price. So kind of
Yes.
acknowledging that as you go in, okay. Is there anything I'm not signing here?
Right. All
That's
the
all.
ways in which we deceive ourselves.
Well, we have to. Who else do we get? And that's what it gets down to. How deep can you go? Do you say, well, who's deceiving who here? What are you talking?
Right.
You know?
Right. I mean, I understand you. I'm not sure if other people are going to understand us, but I understand you right now.
Yeah, it's like, okay, well, if it's not you talking to yourself, who's talking to yourself? And if you can't answer that question in a way that makes any sense to you, then you better find out who's talking to yourself.
Right.
That's a way of looking at it, right? Perspective intelligence.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit in that first group of hippies that you met with him. How many
Uh,
were you at the time? And how did you work on developing these kriyas together?
oh, okay. Well, that's a whole story. So imagine as kind of a series of ashrams that were spread out. This is a typical multi-level marketing situation, right? But so he sent out teachers and myself, and we migrated and taught in different places. I was sent to Northern California and stayed at that ashram where we started in San Rafael,
Right.
and other people were to other places. So this finally, after a while, Yogiji said to me he wanted to start a new way of processing information. I think that's what he said too, processing information. Way
Okay.
ahead of his time, right? You
Uh-huh.
know, this was like 1971, 70 something, 71. And so he said, would you like to go start an ashram down in Southern California called the Kundalini Research Institute, where we can support you to put together, you practice these kriyas for 40 days prescribed, you go through them and you document as a scientific thing, because we had actually PhD hanging out with us.
Mm-hmm.
As a scientific experiment of, the efficacy of this situation. So I said, well, yeah, that sounds like a cool thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I moved myself from San Rafael to Pomona, where we started this Kundalini Research Institute, we called it KRI. And we practiced the kriyas. We went through all of for the prescribed time
Mm-hmm.
in a minimum of 40 days.
How
Then
many of you were there?
I think it was about 25 of us, maybe 30
Okay,
in that
there.
range. Yeah. It's a relatively big old place. And what was ironic about it, at that time, if you're familiar with the Los Angeles basin there's San Bernardino, then there's Pomona, and then Pasadena. And at that time, there was no smog controls on anything. And the smog was literally, I'm talking fumes, were so bad, you couldn't see across the street. Not talking about fog now, we're talking smog. It was that bad.
Right. Right.
And Pomona, where we put this ashram, was right in the worst part of it.
Mm.
So we're doing breath of fire under
Oh,
battlefield
wow.
conditions.
Wow.
I'm just saying it was ironic. It was
Yeah.
okay. Most days weren't that bad, but the bad days were bad. That was the ironic part of the whole thing. But we did that for, I think I was there for over a year and a half before I said, I had enough of this shit. I'm not breathing this air anymore, you know?
Mhm.
And I moved to Westwood, about 2 blocks from OJ's old house, where he in that neighborhood,
Right.
which we had some friends that were starting an ashram there. So nice neighborhood. Definitely up my goal from Pomona. Fuck's sake, you know. Anyway, so that's what we did, and then I started teaching again. And when I was there, I taught at UCLA. I taught at University High, Venice classes, up in different places at the ashram too, and on Robinson.
Mhm.
So
How many
did
years have you been teaching?
I think I said like 50 years because
50
I'm
years.
76 now. So when I started, if I actually started teaching when I was like 20, well, it has to be even 20. So it has to be that 56 years.
Wow.
Yeah, since I actually started teaching Kundalini yoga
Amazing.
or close to it, in that ballpark.
Absolutely amazing. You really started this very young.
Well, luckily me, because when you've taken as much psychedelics at that time and having a general idea of what you're looking for as far as not only the yoga, but the idea of a healthy body, climbing mountains, and you have a general and was able to do that.
Hmm.
That gave the right background.
It did. Yeah, you have to have a healthy vessel for the Kundalini to move through.
That's what I really want to tell everybody. Take the time to practice some discipline first. If you
Hmm.
don't, and the Kundalini starts to manifest, I don't know if you'll be able to handle it on not only psychological level, but a biological level.
Right.
So it's important to at least get yourself in position. It's like going to, I don't know, somebody could do any metaphor for any sports event, but you've got to train for it.
Exactly. Yeah. So
But
it's
again,
good.
some people are just naturally gifted and it
Mhm.
just happens, and then it happens. But if you're going to actually use it as a discipline or try to force your way into this particular state of consciousness, you have to set the basic form.
So do you suggest people eat a very healthy diet too, on top of everything?
Well, there's two ways of looking at that. You can either just say, fuck it, I'll eat whatever I want and power through it and create that
Hmm.
kind of personality, or you can be maybe a little more sensible and say, yeah, maybe I can just have a nice, healthy body to work in instead of fighting everything all the time.
Right.
So of
Exactly.
course,
Yeah.
if you don't have a healthy way of thinking and compassion for your own body, well, I don't know what you can have compassion for anything else.
Hmm.
If you want to love something, love yourself. If you can't love
Absolutely.
yourself, you can't love anything else.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so use that basic idea, that frame of consciousness, and start looking at yourself and say, well, do I love this? Do I love that? Really?
Right.
You talk
Right.
yourself into loving that?
Yeah. It's such an important point, especially, for the younger generations out there that might be listening to this, the loving yourself and what that actually means, putting the healthy things in your body, giving yourself the time
Yes.
that you need, like
If you
not putting toxic things into your ears, listening to things that are going to upset you, spending too much time on the technology and then putting spending some time getting in contact with who you are through something healthy like Kundalini yoga postures, all really important. Yeah.
it all comes down to deciding who you are.
Hmm.
I mean, for yourself.
Right.
And then you have to make some choices here. Ultimately, you're going to come to a place where, who the fuck am I?
Right.
And what's your answer going to be to that? How limited is your answer going to be? Well, I'm just this form right now talking to itself, apparently. Okay, that's one way of looking at it. Or seem to be an expanded form of consciousness possible here, of vistas way beyond this body that this body is just a small part of.
Hmm.
That's another way of thinking of this. And if
Right.
that's the case, how could that state of consciousness be brought back into this body in some kind of coherent form? What would that look like to have that expanded state of consciousness morph back into the physical psychological form, right? That's how you approach this from
Right.
coherent way of looking at it.
Right. And
And
once that
so
expanded consciousness, right, comes into that form, then what are the decisions that expanded consciousness is going to make for themselves in that lifetime, that's going to make a difference on this planet for themselves and other people?
when you take on the Shakti power, you and I are both aware that's there. The responsibility is that level of coherence.
Yes.
You have to be really careful.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
So the image that you ultimately portray, and this is your whole life, by the way, not just you looking at me right now, but my whole life has to portray as a relationship to that Kundalini in real time.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's the level of responsibility that if we start, and if I start really paying attention to, then you become hyper aware, a sense of this relationship with the universe. And I always say, who's observing who here? I'm understanding there's a polarity involved in every kind of currents of energetics, but I'm going, am I the observer? Am I watching this shit? Or am I the observed and being part of this? And it's continually changing back and forth, perspective, intelligence. And of course, it shifts all around that goes that particular orbit of the now. That's how my mind works. And I'm going, looking at it, going, just take it easy, relax. In the center of everything, right?
Right.
You are to heart. And why would you wish, and that's back to loving yourself. Why would you wish anything for yourself but joy? Or does someone just fuck you up so badly that you can't think of anything else? And if that's not the case, you have no excuse. Love yourself,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
give that happiness to yourself. Give yourself the possibility of really feeling happiness and joy and health in every fiber of your possible imaginative relationship to your physical body. In other words, get that deep into this.
Right.
You can get that deep into
I
this.
know you can. You can.
So
That's the
that's
whole
all,
thing.
and that's the whole thing right there. So enjoy that. Take the time to do that, guys. That's the advice I'd have. Take the time to get to know yourself. Get the time to love yourself, because when you love yourself, you'll create the choices that promote yourself towards happiness, joy. Healthiness just comes natural.
Yep.
Give
And
yourself
we're the only
permission.
ones who are going to do that. We can only make that decision. Nobody can make it for us.
Nobody can but ourselves. That's the self-love, you say, but do you trust yourself enough to make that decision? Is it okay? You're God, Sukmandir, right? You're going to embody Shiva, right? Well, to some degree, we'll give it a go, right? There's limitations involved here,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a level of responsibility you take ultimately. If we're going to be, you and I and the rest of, and this is part of the Kundalini family in a sense. Well, it's all is ultimately we're getting all of you in our cult. Fuck's sake, you know. But that whole thing of evolutionary consciousness, let's make it as healthy as we can. Let's make it happy as we can, joyful, shared journeys. I mean, I keep saying there's going to be entropic dreams here. This is a beginning and an end. It's meant to be that way. It's never, all this stuff changes, but have nice flowing changes that are fun for all involved. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
someone's got to play the asshole, someone's got to play the other thing. It's okay, but make it awareness that it's just a game we're in here. And it's not that we don't take it personally.
Right. And we don't take it too seriously. We don't take ourselves too seriously either, right?
I think we have to take ourselves really seriously, really, really seriously. I think we have to take ourselves that fucking seriously. That's how serious this has to be. You have to find that self that you have no choice but to believe in.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? When you find that self, then that's the one you don't. Yeah, of course. And then you begin to trust yourself.
Right.
Because if you can't trust yourself, who the fuck are you going to trust?
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
you have to be able to make. You have a cognitive intelligence that you have practiced over the years, has a valid, cohesive network here that can be coherent. You have to trust yourself to say, okay, is that working? Is it bringing into your body Is your life around you reflecting that? Is every part of your life? And then, of course, there's minor corrections you're making, but the answer is yes. And that's what you try to do. You try to bring what you think your image would look like in an expanded state of consciousness inhabiting, this human form. If you can bring that into focus, and that's what Kundalini Yoga is. It's a fine focusing mechanism. It's a technique of bringing this whole thing into focus.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good definition.
That is a good definition. Yeah. Taking what you would be if you were expanded into who you are right now. Who would you be? And then you make those decisions. You become
Based on
that.
that.
You are that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Beautiful.
And understand, believe me, being there, you're gonna have to make course corrections. Your
Yeah.
karmas, all that's going to be, all your conditioned mind's going to be playing into this effect you're playing with right now, even though you could get out of it in a second if you decide to wake up.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, we're playing through this dance, saying, okay, well, seems like fun. So make sure it is fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Make it fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Kundalini it has the potential to change your life, but for me, it's been really, really subtle ways that I didn't even realize it was happening until you just have a moment where you're like, wow, like, you just start to see and feel, and it gives me access to my higher self, where my higher self starts to make more of the decisions, call the shots, less of coming from the mind, more of coming from the heart. And I just love being this person now, because I feel like I've taken who I think I would be if I didn't have a body and I was just a big part of the spirit, and put it back in and said to myself, who do I want to be to shine my light so bright? Because that's what we are. We're the light. How do you want to shine your light so bright?
We
Right?
create, yes, of course. Thank you. That's wonderful. And I totally love it. That's what we have to become who we want to be, who we project ourselves to be. We inhabit this form. And that's what it comes about. You become in focus. You're bringing yourself into focus. So nice to see. And that's all we're doing here is fine focusing. And the focus, the lens that I keep, the prism that I create in this jewel of my own mind that I'm trying to really get, some kind of, static point of reference here. In that point of consciousness, I'm trying to create something out of the heart center of that image,
Right.
out of compassion, out of love, out of
Mm-hmm.
joy, of
Mm-hmm.
health, of shared expansiveness.
Right.
So in the middle of all this mental stuff I go through, I do bring it back into my heart. And
Yeah.
that feels the best place to be.
Absolutely, right? And then, right, when we do that and we like radiate out to other people, the people who are around us who might not be feeling that great or might have their own things that they're going through, like our energy affects their energy, and then their
Yes.
energy starts to change. Their vibration starts to change, and our little world becomes better. Like the people that we meet then start to feel better, start to feel that love, that vibration, and it becomes what all religions preach as like the epitome,
Yes.
because we're all connected. We're all connected at a subatomic level, on the energetic level. We're all one. And
Well,
that's what you guys tapped into with the psychedelics back in the day.
I might prefer to call it my fellow mycelium.
You're so silly.
Anyway, yeah, that's the joy of it. We are all one. And when you then say, okay, well, what is this? If this is all God, which I get to assume that it is, because it's the mind of God, this must be. What else could it be, in a sense, and those infinite type of perspective
Right, right.
intelligence? What else could it be?
Uh-huh.
Well, then, since we seem to be the somewhat, and I use that word loosely, intelligent part of this equation of this planet, we seem to have control over how we would treat something that we would love, just love. You don't abuse it. Love and abuse are two separate categories. You've taken the wrong turnoff there.
Right.
So just be coherent of that. Put, like you say, put that message out that, yeah, love is the answer. You don't have to be a fucking hippie, but you have to be heart-centered. You still can carry a gun if you have to. I mean, it's gonna, love is weird, right?
Uh-huh.
There's a level of dharma to love, a service to that, whatever brings
Yes.
that. It just means you're conscious, your compassionate nature within your heart. Everything comes from that. All your actions are formulated around that. And
Absolutely.
that point, I think it's safe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, you and I, we've gotten off into the philosophy, into the core really of what Kundalini is, and that I think is the most beautiful thing, to be able to have other people to have these kinds of conversations where we talk about this is who you become when you do these practices. I don't know how, I don't know why, maybe you know better than me how these simple postures can create this kind of effect and get our Kundalini energy like radiating through us in this way to create this kind of change. But it works. It works.
There's two ways this works. The first way is when you practice any kind of a static movement and add an energetic field to it, it tends to create that mental possibility. So it works on a real kind of material biological level. It gets the energy moving, the kriyas,
Mm-hmm.
that's going, and that happens on that biological level
Mm-hmm.
just by doing it.
Yep.
Then there's a whole mental exercise that goes with it, that you're bringing this our typical form of consciousness down as the Kriya manifest in most human DNA related forms would actually move through your body like this. You're giving yourself permission to understand that on some kind of conceptual, idealistical level, intellectual level,
Mm-hmm.
psychological level. So when those two meet, the biological and the psychological, that becomes the reality of who we are right now in the point of contact. And that's where they meet each heart.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just another way of looking at stuff,
Yeah. Yeah. That's a
how to
beautiful
become
image.
integrated personality, so to speak.
Yeah. I kind of saw it the way an artist would paint it as you were talking, right?
I'm talking with my hands again. I
Let
just
me
really,
go
you
ahead.
understand what I do here. I just get into feeling the energy myself, and I'm going to let my body express it. I
What do
mean,
you think, Sukmandir, about this term enlightenment that people put out there? Do you think that Kundalini Yoga produces an enlightenment, or do you think what we're talking about is the only really form of enlightenment that there is?
what we're talking about is the only enlightenment I can conceive of is just becoming myself.
Right, yeah.
And myself would also include yourself and everybody else's self, the entire selves and the entire imaginable, possible, beyond inimaginable universe. That's a lot of selves to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
You get a vision of that and you go, yikes.
I think that the realizing that, like truly realizing that you stop having an us versus them divisions between people, between groups. You start to have more of a compassion. You start to realize, stop taking things so personally, you just start to see things a little bit differently.
Yeah, you
And
see that, but there unfortunately is us and them, and it's what you in this biological I, all of us collectively support by whatever form that we're maintaining this biological form in society, right? And that karma with the
mhm,
bills we're paying
mhm, mhm,
is ultimately supporting something that we believe in. And if we don't take that responsibility, democracy, right,
mhm,
somewhat seriously, as a conscious being, that's
mhm,
when this whole thing becomes manipulated and crazy. So I don't know exactly the point I'm trying to make there, but other than the responsibility has to formulate down through every part of our being, including the society that we're supporting, living in, being part of.
mhm.
I
No, I
keep reminding myself that, I'm not trying to be a monk in a cave here, I'm trying to be cognizant of the 8 billion? Is it that much? I think it's 8 billion people now, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
And not counting. I mean, really, and you have to consider that as part of your mental outlook, because that's, we already agreed it's all one. So this is just us talking to ourselves here. Hi, how's it going? You know, did you know there's 8 billion of us around here fucking around these days? I mean, what, how could that be kind of set up into some kind of, and you have to ask yourself, well, why are there 8 billion of us running around here?
Yeah, why are there 8
Is there a
billion? Why would
shortage here of humans? You know,
we?
well, whatever answer you come up with, you know, whatever kind of convoluted technical, I don't know what, we had to have cell phones, right? And it took that many people to create cell phones. I don't know. Seems like there might have been a little bit more easy path. But who am I to talk? I have 4 kids, so who am I to talk?
Where do you think we're heading, Sukmandir, as a just as human race on this planet? Do you think we're heading? Lots of people are having like gloom and doom. We're heading towards an apocalypse, or do you think we're heading towards something different? What's the evolution here, as far as you can see?
So it always comes down to what's the limitations of your own mind. And luckily, I have a huge sci-fi background to dwell on here, you know. But the limitation, what do you think your limitations are? How do you see yourself? Are you, again, this infinite being that's experiencing this body form, this human form? Who are you? Or are you this body form that's kind of thinking that, well, there better be a fucking infinite being out here? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Where's that equation meeting yourself? At the heart, hopefully, right? You have to take that into account of just who you are. And then if it's like Rajneesh said, you know, you're never born, never died. Well, that part of us, never born, never dies. That part of us is us, of course, and we're just trying to inhabit this particular forms right now. And again,
Mm-hmm.
the quality of the prism of my own mind is that any type of that communication has to go through the heart, has to be through joy, happiness, health, you know. Although as a Sikh, you know, believe me, I still carry a sword. I'm, you know, I'm not going to put up with too much shit on that level. The
Mm-hmm.
shit, you know, comes down to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm aware of that part of my own personality, and I've come to grips with it, so to speak.
Right.
Hopefully, the need will never be there anymore. But should it happen, don't fuck with me.
As gentle as a dove, but as wise as a serpent, right?
I have no idea. You can say anything else. We can get metaphors forever here.
So let's see here. Let me see how I want to, if there's any other questions I want to ask. This has been more of a talk on philosophy, which is wonderful.
I can't tell the difference anymore, Marianne. I can't tell the difference between philosophy and yoga.
Yeah,
I
I
have to
hear you.
I have to be experiencing what I'm talking about as I'm talking about it, because
Yeah,
otherwise it doesn't make sense to me.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
So as I'm talking to you about this stuff, I'm letting my body go through these contortions. I'm like, okay, well, how's that working out for you? And it's just loosening up different points in my back and stuff.
Yeah, it does. It
But
does. And maybe to
I can observe this and going, okay, well, if that's what you got to do, and I could just sit still too, you know.
You know what I noticed over the years, Sukmandir, is that you have a wonderful sense of humor and you're always cracking jokes in every yoga class. And I'm, busting out laughing many times as I'm doing my yoga. How important do you think a sense of humor is as a yogi and just like as a spiritual person of any kind?
I think if you don't get the ironic sense of all this, then I think you have to look at the other side of it, the intent of God just to fuck with this part of it, you know? So as much as I'd like to blame God, I think I just see the ironic part of it. I just you have to go, what? What I mean is I thought I was hallucinating in the 60s, but what the fuck is this,
Right.
Jeez.
And it can feel
But,
that way these days.
well, it has to be back to what else you tell someone, back to the idea of change. Change is happening, guys. Mind is going to expand. You're going to have to find different neural pathways to your own conscious, subconscious mind. You're going to have to get rid of all this shadow work pretty fast. Don't fuck around with it anymore. There's enough groups out there to help you with any little personality, psychological quirks that you're experiencing. Time's up. Get on with the program. Know yourself. Okay. Take your time to do that. Work on the yoga, the breath, whatever, Tai Chi, whatever you want to work on. Just not trying to sell yoga. It's all yoga. Work on the breath, heart rate. Make that harmonic happen. So every breath you become, even though it's long and deep, it's set to that harmonic of your heart.
Right. Because yoga is union. It's just union.
Well,
Many different
yeah.
types of way
What
to.
else? What do you have? What are we being in union with? Ourselves. That's the only thing you can. If you can't become unified in yourself, well, what's going on?
Yeah.
So that's a philosophical overlay, right? But the point being is these overlays kind of move through my body. There are different ways of, I call them perspective intelligence. Oh, I'm looking at it from this point. Oh, that point, that's interesting. Okay, wow, well, not from that point, you know. It's allowing your mind to move through, because it's just the now we're looking at, right? So I keep going down to how close can you get to, I'm orbiting this intense singularity of consciousness, literally in my own mind, I'm going, how close can I get to that before it's going to fuck me up forever? Like I'm gone.
I
Lost
think
in
that too.
yeah.
You know what I'm wondering?
Hmm.
Is there a question that you've always wanted to be asked that you were never asked?
One question I keep asking myself is why do this? You can just retire, relax. Everybody's taking care of my life. It's not a big deal. And I think the answer is when I talk to myself. And a lot of times I'm capable of just sitting in meditation. But when I talk to myself and start actually listening to myself, it almost makes sense. I would almost think if Angel, I'm on a podcast, excuse me. Anyway, yeah, it's all reality on me too. Everything happens because that's how it happens. So, but you treat your life as real. That's what I keep reminding myself. Treat every part of your life as real. I mean, as if you were in position to having a relationship with consciousness itself. In other words, if you could get that close to it, what would that look like for you? And you have to that's what gets back to this envisioning process of what would that look like in this particular form in the karmas of this form that I'm inhabiting? What would that relationship look like? What could it look like? And the yoga fits in so nicely because it fits into a lot of outward forms. It's not limited to what kind of clothes you wear, what hat you wear. It's all internal. So that's why you can use it. You can do in the mosque, you can practice your yoga internally, you know. You don't have to go through the extreme stretches. You can just go through like you're going through massaging yourself with these energy fields, the ultimate what you're looking for. Yeah, that's what I do. Just ways of approaching yourself. Yoga is a valid pathway, and it'll be in the same pathway of all the different martial arts. Everything will come back to the third center. Learn that. I'm going to keep telling myself, I always reset my third center every day, because it's that easy just to float up into the heart and not even worry about it for me. So I take the time at this age, like, really, you think you would have had that set by now, right? But I take the time to revitalize that connection. And that means you pull that energy up from the first three centers. You literally grab onto your own self, pull it up all the way up through the spine. And you imagine there's a hydraulic fluid going up your spine. You're pumping that hydraulic fluid up. Well, don't do it literally, for God's sake, okay? But you're doing that. You're feeling that moving up. You know, that's called the ojas. And if you want to envision something, it's like a warm honey moving up your spine. And that's on a biological level. You start to feel it that way. You have to understand this has to be holistic. You can't, if you just, it's just a vision, you know, like it's a really good, like reading a story. If you start to experience this vision, that's when it becomes real. So as I'm talking to you, I'm trying to really experience this. Okay, how close can you feel that right now? And so that's the level of attention I try to bring to wherever I'm talking and how I'm talking to you, of course.
Mhm.
How close can I come to that point of acknowledgement? And what does that point of devotion look like? You know, how can I serve that? You know, I mean, what's the best presentation that I can bring to it, you know? And you have to say, well, I guess this is it.
Mhm. You know, you made me think of something when you were just talking. I don't know if you're aware of Joe Dispenza, Dr. Joe Dispenza. He teaches people all different kinds of classes on, you know, how to better themselves, heal themselves mostly.
Yeah,
And now he's using Kundalini Yoga in his last book, Superhuman, and also in just his workshops. Not calling it Kundalini Yoga, but using Kundalini Yoga in his
right,
workshops now to
right.
give people the ability to heal themselves. What do you think about that? Do you think
I
Kundalini
love,
energy has the ability to heal the body?
if it doesn't, then don't do it, for God's sake, because that's what it's all about.
Right.
You know, of course it does. It's if you're tuning into the archetypical form of consciousness and you're kind of acknowledging, oh, this is close to best I can imagine it might possibly be, which is, you know, an evolutionary form that carries across into a cellular representation. And that representation should have health, vitality, joy, presence of being.
Hmm.
I mean, if you were programming that, you know, from some consciousness, you'd say, no, yeah, let's do that. You wouldn't do it. So keeping in mind, those are probably the primal attributes for all of us. Yeah, Kundalini Yoga gives you the tools to give access to the state of consciousness that allows you to think like that, and then ultimately to live like that.
Right.
Okay. So yeah, it's a good thing. It's like having, you know, you won't go wrong. It's not going to hurt you. It's not,
Right.
you know, it's not going to go like, you don't have to join a cult.
Uh-huh. And you don't have to become a Sikh either, right?
No, not at all. Not at all. This is just works for me. This was an
Right.
image that fit over my particular alpha personality that satisfied all the little quirks that are me, you know? And it's like,
Mhm.
I can do this. And I can do it sincerely, and I'll take that commitment. Work for me. But just my friend who's a sadhu who's visiting right now, he's more of the Hindu religion, you know, and we get along perfectly, you know? It doesn't matter. No,
Right.
the form doesn't matter. It's the internal dialogue that you bring to introspection, to defining who you are. That's what
Yes.
matters. It's all
Yep.
that ever matters. So
Yeah.
there it is. So Kundalini yoga. Yeah, I think you won't go wrong, you know.
Yeah. So I'm going to end with this question. The personality construct of Sukmandir, how would you like that personality construct to be remembered years from now when you're back, you know, into your energy is merged with the energy that is? How would you like that personality construct to be remembered?
Yeah, you know, it's I was just thinking about that, you know, as far as you know, because I can imagine myself just as like almost 1 year old, you know, I can imagine some of the sensations. And that's me. And I can imagine myself growing, you know, up, and all those are me. And
Hmm.
I can imagine, you know, up to this point now, and all those are me. So the only thing that I have is right here now. So however this comes across, and for me, it's from the heart, as a message to myself, to remember, to always remember that the crown center, the thousand petal lotus, is real. It can have you can access the codes to that by practicing the Kundalini yoga, by allowing the energy to flow through you. It becomes spontaneous, becomes natural, becomes effortless. But
Absolutely.
again, you have to have a strong body, for the energy fields to be able to manifest through you, to allow that to happen, I think that you need to have a discipline to get to the point of that experience.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's my disclaimers.
Sukmandir, I just want to tell you, and I want you to know that from the bottom of my heart, I absolutely love you, and I'm so grateful for you, and I'm so grateful for just who you are and how it's affected me and the changes that I have experienced, and I will be grateful to you until the day I die.
Thank you, Marianne. All I can say is you're welcome. And as long as I don't get in the way of it too much, it seems to be more and more just what happens.
You don't. You're wonderful.
Thank you.
I just did yoga with you last night, whether you know it or not.
Thank you, Marianne.
Satnam,
But now,
love
many
you very
blessings.
much.
May all your visions and dreams fine tune them, and they'll become reality. And it's a very changing mindscape out there right now. So it's, you have to evolve. Remember, evolving means adapting. Adapt yourself to that mental scape that's out there that's moving through this. But yes, pay attention. You got this. I'm right there with you. I love it.
Love you.
You too.
I'm going to stop recording now.
Okay.